Bangladesh's deposed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been sentenced to death for crimes against humanity during the July uprising in 2024. But there remains the questions of how the sentence will be carried out and what will be the implication of this verdict on Bangladesh's political landscape with the national election knocking on the door. We answer these questions and more in today's Star Viewsroom. I'm Naziba Bashar, your host for today, and with me is Zaima Islam, senior reporter at the Daily Star. Welcome back to the show, Zaima. So firstly, this is the first time in Bangladesh a former head of government has been sentenced to death. Why was she handed the death penalty, and what was the evidence presented against her in court?
Thank you so much, Naziba. So I want to go beyond sentimental rhetoric a little. We all know what happened during the July uprising. We were there. We saw it firsthand. We saw how people were killed. We saw the dead. We handled the dead. We interviewed their families. So that Sheikh Hasina should be tried for crimes against humanity, I think that much we have established. Right. But I want to go beyond that, just a bit. The court, for example, they had in their possession phone recordings of conversations that Hasina had with a former minister, that Hasina had with a former mayor. And all of these phone recordings point to her liability, point to her culpability. Right. In these phone conversations, Hasina herself admitted to having given orders to shoot at students. So for example, in a conversation with former Dhaka South City Mayor, Sheikh Taposh, who happens to be her nephew. Right. Sheikh Hasina talked about how she has given orders to use lethal weapons. Right. She said from now on, only lethal weapons will be used. Right. She explained in detail how she wanted to suppress the movement using lethal weapons, and Sheikh Taposh agreed with her. Right. So that's just one conversation that they had in their possession. The Daily Star actually did a report on this recording. Right. So going beyond what the prosecution had with them and how the prosecution analyzed the evidence, how they made sure that the evidence wasn't, say, AI generated. Right. The Daily Star also independently analyzed that particular phone recording. So Daily Star got hold of the recording, and then we independently analyzed it, and we found that it was a perfect match with Sheikh Hasina's voice. Right. So it was indeed her who had spoken in that recording. And then there's this other phone conversation that she had with former minister Hassanul Haq Inu. Yeah. In that phone conversation, she spoke about dropping bombs from helicopters, which is a little scary. Yeah, very scary. In that chilling moment, Hassanul Haq Inu agreed that it was a good idea. Right. And so Hasina has, we've heard it from the horse's mouth, how our ousted prime minister had given orders to shoot at students, to kill students, to use the maximum possible force needed to suppress this movement. Right. And then there is the key witness, which was the former Inspector General of Police, Chaudhry Abdullah Mamun,
who was initially accused in the case but later turned approver and state witness.
Yes, he was a state witness. He turned into an approver. And because he was such a key enabler during the uprising, and he knew exactly what was happening, in the top leadership. He knew what kind of orders were being given. He knew what kind of police action was happening and where. Yeah. So his testimonial was, of course, very key to the prosecution of Hasina. And, with all of these in hand, I think it goes beyond doubt that she is indeed guilty
of crimes against humanity.
Guilty of the crime that she has been sentenced for.
So with such hard evidence at hand in court and the death penalty already handed down, do you think Sheikh Hasina's fate is sealed, or can the verdict be appealed somehow?
See, the verdict, of course, it can be appealed. But for that, Sheikh Hasina needs to surrender in front of the International Crimes Tribunal, and only then can she appeal against this judgment. And all of that needs to happen in the next 30 days. Now, the snag is that Sheikh Hasina will not be engaging with the International Crimes Tribunal. She has stated very clearly that she thinks that this is a politically motivated case, a politically motivated judgment, and that she will not engage with the ICT.
And she has said this on multiple occasions, I believe.
On multiple occasions, across multiple media platforms. She said that she asked the government to prosecute her in the International Criminal Court instead. But that can only happen if a prosecution or a conviction in the ICT falls through. Right. We have already achieved a prosecution and a conviction in the ICT. So just to add to that, I do not think that Sheikh Hasina will be filing an appeal against this judgment because she chooses not to, because she wholesale rejects the idea that this conviction can in any way, not be politically motivated. I do also want to point out International Crimes Tribunal did hand out death penalties to multiple other politicians from Jamaat Islami, for example, during 2013 and 14, and then later as well.
For the 1971 war crimes.
For the 1971 war crimes. And during that period of time, Sheikh Hasina did keep saying that this is not a politically motivated court. She upheld the standards of the court. She defended the ICT. So, 10, 12 years down the line, she has gone back to calling it a politically motivated court.
Right.
So the question, of course, rises. The judicial system, it's not necessarily any more different than it was in 2013. In fact, the ICT Act, the law itself, has been amended since then. So what has changed?
Exactly. So she has, on multiple occasions, like you said, say that this entire judgment or trial was politically motivated. And we have also seen that from many human rights organizations, they have raised objections that the trial was not done fairly. So can we just talk about these particular allegations and also the state appointed defense counsel?
Absolutely. So if you've read the statements made by these human rights organizations carefully, you'd know that they're talking about the death penalty itself. The fact that the death penalty has been handed down is not something that any human rights organization will ever approve of.
Especially the UN, who has constantly spoken against it.
The United Nations has conducted a fact-finding mission in Bangladesh. In fact, we still keep on quoting the United Nations fact-finding missions report all the time when we're talking about references when it comes to the July uprising that happened last year. We say that 1,400 people have died, and this is a figure that we keep citing from the United Nations fact-finding missions report itself. But when the United Nations is saying that they do not approve of the death penalty, they're talking about it. This is not specific to this trial. This is not specific to, say, the case of Sheikh Hasina. They will not approve the death penalty for any case across the world. And a lot of modern states do not, in fact. They've abolished the death penalty, and they have been calling for a moratorium on death penalties across the world, worldwide. But if you do get to the nitty-gritties of the case just a little bit, Sheikh Hasina did not engage with the legal process, as we know. She was appointed a state defense counsel. And there are some problems when you have a state defender. Is that I don't know if you know about the performance of state defenders, but state defenders are almost always very overworked, overburdened, and they do not have the same resources as, say, privately appointed defense counsel. And when you're being accused of murder or crimes against humanity, in this case, you want to have the best representation possible. But this state-appointed defense counsel was, and many experts have said that he was quite inadequate in his performance. For example, he did not produce any witnesses, so there were no defense witnesses. His cross-questioning, his cross-examination was not adequate. And he did not challenge a lot of the prosecution's assumptions, a lot of the prosecution's hypotheses that they made in court. And ultimately, what happened is that the judgment reflects what the prosecution posited in court, because the defense did not really put up a strong argument. For example, we were talking about the phone conversations earlier, right? And the defense counsel just said that these are AI generated. Like that's almost like criticizing for the sake of criticizing. Because we all know those weren't AI generated. There's enough proof to prove that those weren't AI generated. And so, it was almost trivial, some of the ways he challenged the evidence presented at court.
So let's come to the main question, and I believe everybody has this question on their minds right now. Do you think this verdict can actually be carried out?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I keep going back to that moment at court where the judges were reading out the verdicts, when they read out the verdict that Sheikh Hasina has been sentenced to death. And I was looking at the faces of the families who were crying, the mothers, the sisters, the fathers. And it was a very sobering moment. You know, as an individual, I may not support the death penalty. I may support the death penalty, and that's my own personal political view.
Right.
But I am not the one who has lost a family member.
Right.
And so for them, they believe that only the execution of this sentence can bring true healing.
Right.
Anything less is simply a symbolic.
Please give them some closure. Yeah.
It would give them some closure. Anything less would just be a symbolic victory.
Yeah. For them.
For them, of course. Having said all that, bringing Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh is difficult. It's a very difficult diplomatic struggle that we have to undertake. We have to remember that when Sheikh Hasina left Bangladesh last year, it was through a concerted effort by both Bangladesh and India, especially the security forces. So Sheikh Hasina was taken to India with India's full knowledge. India gave her asylum. India is hosting her. India is not just hosting her, but also hosting hundreds of other Awami League activists on Indian soil. And while Bangladesh has so far not officially made a request for extradition, India has not shown any sign that they will be returning Sheikh Hasina or they want to return Sheikh
As a matter
Hasina.
of fact, even in their reaction to the verdict, they said they took note of the verdict, but they never mentioned anything to do with extraditing her or sending her back to Bangladesh.
There was no conversation about that at all in that statement. And Indian media has been going a little haywire with the kind of coverage that they're giving to the Awami League side of the story. I mean, it's a little disproportionate. If you look at their coverage yesterday, they did not give as much coverage to the experience of the victims, of the families of the 1,400 people who were killed, of those who are injured, those who have lost lives, limbs, eyes, who are maimed. But then you had a deluge of coverage about Awami League's feelings about the verdict. I mean, that's important, of course, but it has to be balanced. It has to be proportional. So I think Bangladesh is right now treading into difficult waters because on one hand, they have to maintain a healthy diplomatic relationship with India. And on the other hand, India is now harboring a convicted criminal that Bangladesh wants back, that beyond just the government of Bangladesh, the people of Bangladesh want back. I also want to point out that because this is the death penalty, Bangladesh will find itself a little friendless when it comes to extraditing Sheikh Hasina. Because, see, as the UN said that they do not support the death penalty, they do not support the death sentence being given out to Sheikh Hasina. Amnesty said that they did not support this. Human Rights Watch probably also said it, yes. And when you have the largest human rights organization saying that they don't support the death penalty, it's very unlikely that our diplomatic allies will go the opposite way. In fact, in many of their own countries, our strongest allies, I'm talking about them, they've already abolished the death penalty. So I don't think that they will be helping Bangladesh bring back Hasina when what she faces here is death.
So after a long time, it is being said that we're going to face a free and fair election and it's going to be historic. So given this current situation, how do you think the verdict will impact the upcoming polls?
Well, on one hand, you have a party whose chief has just been convicted of having committed crimes against humanity, and there's overwhelming evidence against her, evidence that cannot be discounted. And I think voters will be taking this into consideration. The government, of course, has said that they will not be allowing the Awami League to contest the elections at all. And as of yet, Awami League had been playing the card of victimhood. They had been saying that since they're not being allowed to participate in the elections, that this is hindering the democratic process. But now when we have a conviction, this adds another layer to that argument that, okay, your chief has been convicted of these crimes. So if your party is now being kept out of the elections, is it still hindering the democratic process? I think there are debates about that, of course. The government line, however, remains the same.
So there's a lot to actually see in the future. Thank you so much, Zaima, for being with us. As Bangladesh moves closer to the national polls, the full weight of this verdict and its political aftershock are still unfolding. From legal maneuvers to campaign strategies to shifting public sentiment, much now hinges on what happens in the days ahead. Whether this decision reshapes the electoral landscape or becomes one moment in a far bigger contest for the country's future will only become clear as the events develop. For now, all eyes remain on the lead up to the election. Thank you once again, Saima, and thank you all for being with Star Viewsroom.